Hey there, so today I'm doing something a bit differently on this channel. It's not too different, it's not related to Warriors or one of its related book series, all by Aaron Hunter. Instead of doing one of those, I'm doing a different book. The book is called Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. So I had to read this for one of my college classes. Over the summer I had to read it, so now that I've completed it, I decided on this channel, since this book, I would do a review. Now, I'm going to be doing it kind of differently because we were given a few reading questions for the book, so I'm going to actually answer those in this video instead of my typical way I do videos. But I still want to leave you guys with how I would rate the book, but I'm going to do that in a separate video. So that's going to be coming out probably about 30 minutes after this video. And this video could end up being close to an hour or two long, so it could be divided into multiple parts. I just don't know. And also, I will not be editing anything out of this video except for long pauses while I'm thinking. Other than that, there will be no edits. Because I have 22 questions to answer, and I would consider these more than simple yes/no questions, quick thoughts. Some of these if I was writing them out, which I probably will write them out based off of, I'll be listening to this, and then I'll be typing out my own responses. We actually went directed how to respond to this, so I could actually submit this video as part of it. But let's begin. So the first question is, first of all, before I go into the first question, I just want to say that Station 11 is I'll give you a brief plot synopsis, and there will be spoilers in this for the book if you have not read it. But I do want to say it's set in a post-apocalyptic future, but it actually goes all the way. It actually does a lot of years, does some time jumping around, which can be hard to grasp not necessarily grasp your mind on, but to follow. Oftentimes it may be good for some of them to reflect that this is a character thinking back to that event, because there's one character in the book that a lot of the events that he's involved with, two characters, they're involved in a decent number of it. If you look at those past moments that they were involved with, they witnessed, it starts to make a little more, those time jumps are easier to grasp because you can think of them as them reflecting back on those actual events. But you can't do that for every time there's some jumping around in the plot time, but it does make it unique, interesting. I've watched only a few TV shows that even do that, because it generally is harder to follow. I think it's easier for it to be done in the book, because you can always, well, you can reread it in chronological order if you so desire. But other than that, so as I said, it's set in post-apocalyptic future where a variant of the flu, in the book called the Georgian flu, apparently the swine flu variant, I don't know, but that it devastates the world, killing off most of the population. So if you're watching this and you're thinking, should a child read it, I would say a minimum preteen, even teenager, because it covers some themes there that definitely a young child still in elementary school probably would not necessarily be able to comprehend nor understand. Important just seems to understand and grasp your mind around, but for some of these things are just almost too complicated for young children or even some older children to fully grasp. But beyond that, so the world in this book gets devastated by a flu, and essentially civilization as we know it ends. Literally ends. But there's some relics, and not just the people who survive, but the actual stuff. It'd be quite I know what I would be if where I would want to be. There's two places I think I would want to be if I lived in this world, and that's because of my love of history. Those two places will make sense. Is they're kind of trying to catalog or log or, and the current world and the previous world per se. But let's actually now that we're about 5 minutes 30 seconds in, actually get to the questions I need to answer. So the question one is, King Lear set the stage literally for Station 11. Why does Mandel choose this play? How does it seem to speak to the novel? Or, to put it in another way, how do you feel after you read/watched King Lear in high school? How does the novel play on those responses? Does it make you feel similarly, differently? Now, I just want to say, I have not seen nor watched King Lear, which is one of Shakespeare's plays. In fact, the only Shakespeare I really got exposed to in school was Hamlet. And that was only because my 8th grade teacher wanted us to give us some background on Shakespeare before we did Romeo and Juliet in high school, which, guess what? They changed the curriculum and I didn't do Romeo and Juliet, so I have very little Shakespeare under my belt. I do wish I had more because I believe it is important. Probably should do some almost per se independent study on it, which I might do. But so as for the first question, I don't think there's any true way I can respond to that question because without having any previous experience with King Lear, I think I might have read one passage from it in my schooling, but I don't know for sure. So I can't answer that question at this time. So I may actually go looking into it so I can answer it in the future. So that might be a follow-up video. So, but just move on to question 2. How does Jeevan respond to the paparazzi inquiries into his life? In what way does his answer weave through all the characters we follow in the novel? How do the reasons you are encouraged compare to Jeevan's responses? Now, this was early on in the book, where shortly after a actor had a heart attack during a performance of King Lear. But I just need to double check that. Okay, so it's on page 10, I believe. Okay, so yeah, and so basically, to avoid summarizing it, I'm actually having inquiries, like he respond when he responds to the question in kind of simple ways, and kind of relating, because when somebody in college asks you, like, and some of you see me in college, you tend to give more vague responses. Even in real life, you tend not, you don't quite give, you know, full responses to things. But it's kind of harder to get around because also I don't know too much about the paparazzi, and I feel like a background on them would be useful to me to help me answer this question. But he does kind of respond though simple stuff, like he doesn't give out too much information and all that, kind of like how people just generally don't, in my opinion. In what ways does his answers weave through all the characters in the novel? We're only talking about where he's been. There's some evidence of that. They talking about the past. What he's doing now, I guess. I'm trying to fully grasp how it actually comes around fully. Perhaps a second read would be of beneficial. But also the last part of question 2 is, how do the reasons you're in college compare to Jevan's response? So Okay, so I'm thinking what this referring to is when he says he's trained, when Steven says he's trained to be a paramedic, and then the paparazzi ask him if it's for real that he is that what he wants to do for a living, and he responds, and I quote, "I want to do something that matters, if that's what you mean." But it's the first part before the comma. I want to do something that matters. I think there's a not everyone going to college, but I do feel like there's a large portion of people, the reason why they go to college and pursue a certain degree is because they want to do something that matters. In a way that is somewhat true for me, but it's kind of different. I want to do something that matters, sure, but I also want to do something I enjoy, something that I find interesting. That's why I want to be a history teacher, because I want to share my love of history. But other than but it is something that matters too, because there's a saying, those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it. And that's true to a lot of extent. I won't get too much into that here because I want to kind of focus more, but it's important in my opinion to teach history, to show learn history, and that's actually mentioned later on in the novel with the Museum of Civilization, which I will be talking about later, I'm sure in this. But importance of understanding the past and all in that it's very important. It is something that is important to do. And kind of the same thing, do something that matters. And if you think about it, you may not think about it right away. It may take some time thinking, but you will think about it. So let's move on to question 3 here. I think I'm going to actually put these questions also on the Google Docs and link in the description so that way you can see it for yourself. But on page 27 we get the first mention of an awkward dinner party. How do many of the novel's events hinge on that night? Why? Do you have an event in your life that is equivalent to the dinner party in its significance? So yes, that awkward dinner party, that is mentioned a lot. So I was like, because I read the questions in advance, I was like, huh. But then they go through the dinner party. They mention it a few times. It's, but it does hinge a lot. It inspires a scene in um in the comic book that I would say one of the main characters, Kristen Raymond, I think. Yeah, Raymond has which was which Station 11, which is how this book gets its novel. It was put that dinner party was put into there, so so nearly most of the characters in the main characters that we hear about are somehow connected to that one dinner party. For Christopher Raymond, it's through that comic book. For Arthur Linder, the actor, he was there. Jivan, he was outside being a paparazzi then. And then you have Miranda, Arthur Linder's first wife, who wrote the novel and was also at the party. And a bunch of other, then Clark Thompson, who was also there. Throwing out characters who you may not know. And then you got Tyler Linder, Arthur's son, who also also read that comic, that the Station 11 comic that Kristen had read, and how it and they and that actually influenced them differently per se, but that all the main characters are connected to that dinner parties, and the two who couldn't have been there are connected because of it being featured, it being put into that comic book Station 11, and it does hinge a lot on that night when you think about it, because that's really the night that Miranda discovers that her husband Oscillator was having an affair with Elizabeth, the mother of Tyler Leader, and if it kind of wasn't for that, a lot of the trouble that Kristen Raymond and the Traveling Symphony, I think it's called. I'm sorry, I have to double check this. Traveling Symphony, I believe. Yeah, the Traveling Symphony. If it and that Kristen did, and they came across a town that was taken over by the prophets. If it wasn't for that dinner party, that prophet whenever had been there to cause those problems. Quite intricate when you think about it. But so there's a lot that hinges on that. That dinner party does affect a lot in the plot. If it wasn't for that dinner party, things might have turned out differently. The Georgian flu that present in this book would probably still have happened, but you never know. But most likely it would have. Kind of interesting. Also, how does yeah, I didn't mention that, and why? Well, because of that, because that's when really that the problem when also Miranda began a divorce proceedings, so also can marry Elizabeth and then have Tyler, who, spoiler, becomes the prophet that causes trouble for Kristen Roman. So, so there's all that too. If those events, you take out that dinner party, maybe it would still happen, but there's a good chance it might not have happened. And that would have totally changed the direction of the book. And as for the last part, do you have an event in your life that is equivalent of the dinner party and its significance? I'm honestly not sure about that. It's those things I just don't recall anything I would say that's that significant in my life. I might have something in the future, which is very possible. So since I don't think I can properly answer that question, let's move on to question 4. Chapter 6 begins with a long list of things that were gone after the flu. I'm more interested in what persists. What are the similarities to our world, and is what was lost important, and how do you define important? So yeah, so that's it. And of course, it does mention that incomplete list, but so like a lot of things do disappear, and so is yeah, they are more interested in what persists, and that does show those are the similarities between our world and the world after that flu. So, so there are similarities per se. There's still a lot of self-interest, but all that does disappear. It's kind of hard to say. I think definitely a fascination with escapism. So the Traveling Symphonies seem to do very well based off what I read in the book. Oh, based on the book, I should say. And people always came flooding there. It was a distraction from them, a distraction from the collapse, distraction from how their lives would change. Take the Great Depression as an example. The Great Depression was nowhere near as severe, neither was World Wars, I would say, as this. But people wanted distraction. The film industry became very popular then because they could offer a distraction to the problems of people's everyday lives. Which sounds funny, like especially in the Great Depression, people were poor, but they were willing to spend their money, their hard-earned money, to go see a movie to escape for a short while from their reality. They wanted a different reality. In a way, the Traveling Symphony does that as well. It provides an escape of reality for the people, and that people can rest back. And I think that the reason why the mention that the symphony found Shakespeare to be the most the Traveling Symphony found Shakespeare, the 3 Shakespeare plays that they have copies of, with King Lear, I think was one of them, Hamlet, and A Midsummer Night's Dream, and there might have been a few others, but I think those were the 3. They found those to be the most popular, and I think there's a reason why. Besides the fact that they're good, they're classics, but also they were created in a world before modern convenience. People could relate to the world presented in those 3 Shakespeare plays, yet still receive an escape from their world. And that escapism not only existed during the Great Depression and World War II, where people watched war films where the good guys, you can say their family per se, because their side would have been their family, broad terms for family, but they always came back. Not necessarily reality. It was escape from the fact that a family member yours may come back. You went to see a movie where where essentially somebody just like your family member who went off to fight came back along with everyone else. Of course, I was mostly during the war. I think they did things that good for morale and propaganda purposes, but and then even today we have escapism. With all the problems in the world today, we still go to movies for escape, and what the movies show reflect our what kind of escape we want. Still harking back to our current world, but in a way that offers escape. We watch movies where there's a terror attack, but the terrorists are caught and do justice, and that we those are things are superhero movies. These big powerful super saviors who come and save the world from its problems. In our world, we'll want something like that, something to swoop in and fix all our problems. There's a reason that fits into superheroes. Those escapism always we're looking for a way out of our reality, look a way to be distracted from it. And movies provide that to us in our world, and in the world of Station 11, it was it's the Traveling Symphony provided escape, and the plays that were most popular for them to play took place in a world not necessarily super similar because you had cities, but like with no modern conveniences. That's a connection, and that's thing what persists the most, the desire to have an escape from reality. That's I think the biggest thing I've noticed that persists between the world before and after the flu, and also our world, because I would consider our world to be the world before the flu. Other similarities, I really don't know too much about you still. I guess another similarity is the fact that there's always those people out there who are interested in these real things that nobody else, like alternate realities, time travels, how things could be different, and if there were parallel universes, and how there could be one universe where everything's totally perfect and all that. There's always those few people in the world, and that still is true in the Station 11 award. But I don't know how well that say it persists. But that itself is a form of escapism as well. Also, maybe the following of interest in the lives of celebrities, even if it's celebrities from a bygone era. We always want to know more about celebrities and famous people. So I don't understand that myself, but that does persist to a certain degree. So it is, and also the similarities, and is what was asked important. Dive improves with chlorinated water, lit with green light from below. Not important, really. All you need is a lake without any bacteria. Ball games played under floodlights. Not important, you can play during the day. Porch lights with moths fluttering on summer nights. Not super important. Not really important at all, just trivial, I would say. Trains running under the surface of cities on the dazzling power of electric rail. Not really important. Well, speaking of trains, how come nobody tried to reinvent steam travel? I'm just saying, all you need is a few people who know how to run one steam locomotive, fire it on wood, and you teach other people, and boom, you can have interconnected society again. And the train lines should still be there, and there's plenty of museums that road steam locomotives, so yeah, why wasn't steam locomotives a thing? Why didn't we see them? That's my only complaint. Like, nobody thought to try to restart steam travel, because that would been good for the Traveling Symphony, I would say. They could get between towns quicker, and and they could perform more often. But no, there's something to be said. It would have affected the story, but you still think there would have been some. And you think some that, especially by year 20 after the flu, the Georgian flu occurred, you think somebody, and there might be somewhere, just not in the region where this is shown. I have a feeling over in England, the United Kingdom, more so to say Great Britain, is where there could be most likely steam travel occurring, because heritage railways are very popular over there. But that doesn't relate too much, but so I mention it. No more cities. Well, they're still cities, they're just abandoned. Probably for the better, too. And cities are not necessarily important. They're important for a highly interconnected society, and also for a large society, but beyond that, they're not super important. They're only important for our world. That's the thing. We're important for what world? That's how you define it. And no more films, except rarely. But are films important when you have people who can act out in live action? In person? No. They may not be as good of quality, but they can be better per se. You can get subtle differences between every viewing. Things that make it more enjoyable, more unique. Um, and of course, no more screens shining and half-lives people raise their phones above the crowd to take photographs on concert stage. That's definitely not important. And of course, and there's so many things. No more pharmaceuticals. Now that is the thing that I think is not the most important. They actually, later on in the book, show what could happen with that. But, and that, I think, being lost was important pharmaceuticals. Because it can greatly help survivability, too. And there's so many other things at the list, but, there's a few things. No more countries, all borders unmanned. Well, it's so unmanned and there's no countries, there are no borders. And countries are already constructs that we create to organize society. So, is it important? It can be, but it's not. But I do want to mention, since no more countries, borders unmanned, I think there could have been a few countries that had a chance of surviving. And these are some of the island nations, because they're not as connected. They get all their stuff from imports. Eventually, they couldn't survive the way that they had, but their populations would be intact. Their institutions would be intact. Eventually, though, they would run out of things like they would have to live almost how they used to live, especially in the Pacific Islands. The Caribbean Islands, I don't know as much. They're more travel to than some Pacific Island nations. But island nations that were small had a chance of surviving, and I'm thinking some towns in Alaska had a chance of surviving too, and well intact. But they would have their own problems eventually too. But of all the countries, all the big countries in the world that are not island nations, I do wonder what happened with North Korea. It's a real country to think about, but they're pretty isolationist. They don't trade with anyone except China, and their leaders are considered to be a bit paranoid. They think a flu could cause a problem in their country, they'll shut their borders down. They will be the country most likely to survive, in my opinion, which is weird but fascinating. If a country did survive, one country, how would they act? And if it was a country like North Korea, and its interesting peculiarities, to say the least, that's kind of weird, but what would have happened to them? Like individual countries, you learn more about the people, but I also want to learn more about the geopolitical scale, how countries reacted. Is it possible that elements of a country survived? Which is very possible. I know that the United States has contingency plans for practically everything. The Pentagon has some too, but they have contingency plans. There's a good chance that a small fraction of the U.S. government could have survived the Georgia flu. Maybe not, but could have been a chance. But who knows, really? The more isolationist a country, the better chance. Who knows? And like some of the more poverty-stricken countries with less traffic in and out, could they have survived better off? We just don't know. We honestly just don't know, but I would love to find out. But how do I define important? Well, I alluded to that a little earlier, but important is kind of hard to define. What's important for one person will not be important for another. I think a good base definition for important is something that you need for that something that you need to ensure your survival, and that's the most basic definition of importance. But it could also be to expand it. Anything that is needed to ensure the stability of your survival and the stability of your society. And with that, that's a lot important. Something as simple as as the truck that paints stripes on roads would be important under that definition, because without stripes, roads will be dangerous. So that is a very broad definition, and it's kind of hard to define what is important. But yes, but I think that's probably the best definition I could give. Anything that is needed to ensure to show your survivability and the stability of of any society in your own. But let's move on to question 5. Dieter says that people want what is best about the world. What things do you anticipate that people miss? What about Shakespeare was the best? What function does the symphony serve? What kinds of things would you miss? What is best about the world? I'm assuming they're talking about the world of Station 11. So actually a few of these, like the function the symphony serves, I actually answered it early on, I think, the last question. Oh, yeah, question 4. How the symphony serves as part of an escapism from the reality of the post-Georgian flu world. That's its purpose. It serves as an escape. Allows people to take a breath away to function, and of course, and people want what's best for the world. That's true. What things do you anticipate that people miss? I think a lot of people miss the interconnectedness of the old world in the book. It would make sense. You're no longer able to communicate with your friends far away. You can't stay in touch as much. But there's probably other things that people miss. A lot of people will miss video games. Of course, you can always have board games, but there's something to be said also about video games where you can play with people halfway across the world. Interact with people you may not normally get to interact in your own world in your area. And also, technology is probably the biggest thing people miss. But there's other things too that you can do without technology. But what about Shakespeare was the best? I think I believe they do mention that in the book. But as I mentioned, it's a world without the modern. Shakespeare is a world written in a world that presents a world without modern conveniences, just like the world in the in the world after the Georgian flu. It's that similarity that draws the people to Shakespeare, but it's what's the word I'm looking for? The lack, but it still provides an escape. It's a world without the Georgian flu. It's a world in the past. It's something you can connect to, yet still provide an escape from your modern world. It's quite intricate. And what kind of things would you miss? I would miss YouTube. I would say some, cause there's a lot. I would also miss being. I would still have my Star Wars books I can read, but I would miss new Star Wars content. The only way I would get it would be if somebody gave me a book or a comic book. But yeah, I would probably miss that a lot. I got plenty of books to keep me occupied for sure, but I wouldn't be able to make reviews of them like I do on this channel. In that, I would miss video games to a certain extent, but I will hopefully be able to have things. My books will definitely keep me occupied, and I have plenty of them. And hopefully, and I would have some board games too, and hopefully I'll have people willing to play them to keep me sane. That, but I would definitely miss television, be able to watch all my favorite TV shows and movies, and new movies coming out. I think I would miss that along with YouTube. Would I miss the internet? Yeah, but I think the part of the internet I would miss the most probably would be YouTube reality. That. Let's see. Depending on who I know I would lose, I would definitely miss them. Hopefully, and I do say hopefully because who knows? I might be in shock from losing so many people that I may in that. So I would definitely miss some things. Those are just some things I can think of on the top of my head. And again, what is best about the world? Simplicity, maybe, perhaps? But let's move on to question 6. The book takes its title from a series of comics by Mandel. Why? What are the comics about? How does understanding them help us understand the world of the pre and post flu? Why does Kristen take them? So I think the reason why the book takes its title from those fictional comics in the book is because of how it connects it can connect so many characters together. That book, it connects Kristen, it connects the Prophet, it connects Clark, it connects practically everyone except for Jivan, which the only reason why I think he's important is because of how he intersects also life at key moments. And if it wasn't for that, he's the only big character in my opinion that's not in a way connected to those comics, which is quite interesting to say the least. But because it does connect to so many characters are involved in them and impacted by them. What are the comics about? So they're essentially about a post-apocalyptic world as well, but unlike this one, which is a post-apocalyptic apocalyptic world without technology, Station 11, the comic, is one with technology. The fictional comic in the book has technology, unlike the novel itself, which is like the only difference, but you still have the same problems per se. And how does understanding them help us understand the world of the pre and post flu? It shows it has not a similar from what we know about it. It has not a similar themes about it. Has a lot of things that show similarities, how people connect almost to say the longing for that old world. But there's this new world, then you got the regular people, and then you got the people who have become overzealous with those things too, coming about those things. And why does Kristen take them? Well, they were given to her by also, and she pretty much, I would say, idolizes him, is obsessed with him, if you will, which is quite interesting. But also, they do provide her in her own personal form of escapism from the world after the flu, even though she doesn't remember much of the world before the flu, which is quite interesting. But this shows some. So let's move on to 7, which is probably the question I really want to answer the most. What do you make of the line, because survivor is insufficient? Do you agree with that statement? So that was actually taken from a Star Trek Voyager episode. It's episode. Sorry, the 122nd episode. Second episode is the 6th season. So actually, about 2 weeks before, a week or so before I started reading this book, I actually watched that episode. But so yes, so that line there is kind of important because survival is insufficient. Sure, you can just survive, but what is there beyond survival? Just means you eat, you drink, you sleep, and then you repeat. There's not much survival. There's no purpose, no meaning. So the symphony uses that because survival is insufficient to explain their purpose, and it does make sense. Sure, they can just survive like everyone else, but you see these happening anyway. The Museum of Civilization, that library in that one town, they're also a form of this too, because survival is insufficient. They're forming new communities. They're forming things to show that we can survive, but we're going to go beyond survival and rebuild a new civilization. We're going to rebuild the world in the best way that we can. We won't be able to perfectly match the old world, but we'll create a new world because survival is inefficient. And I'd say a new world may not be the best, but it's definitely one way to describe it. Because eventually, so the Georgian flu could show as a point where the world changed instantly within a matter of weeks or days. But what you're saying here, because surviving is insufficient. You start out surviving, but it's not sufficient enough. So you begin rebuilding, you begin building a new civilization from the ground up, practically. You have the elements of the old civilization which you use, but that's it. They're just elements, thoughts, ideas you can build. And do I agree with that sentiment? Certainly. Survive. That's why if I ever get stranded on a deserted island, I want to make sure I have plenty of books with me. Maybe a large batch of paper too. Things just to keep me occupied and do more than just survive. Things I can survive more than survival. Life, you can call it, is more than survival. So let's move on to question 8 now. Arthur has very mixed feelings about his hometown. He says it was go gorgeous and claustrophobic. I loved it and I always wanted to escape. Page 74. Later he envisions Miranda's anonymity, which feels like freedom. Page 78. What does his perception of his town and anonymity suggest about his character and perhaps human nature? How would you compare the anonymity and the small town nature to our presence online? In what ways are we both always known and always anonymous at the same time? How does that affect how we see ourselves and what we value? So let's begin with what does his perception, his town, and anonymity suggest about his character? Like he liked the small town, but it was almost too small. But I think he almost kind of liked the fact of being known but unknown at the same time. Does that try and think? No, he wants to do what he loves, but he doesn't necessarily always want other people to be involved with that. Other people to know every detail which celebrities do get. In human nature, I guess there is something to say. There's something to be said about the small towns where you know everybody, but you do lack a certain anonymity. But then you go to the big towns and you have a much more anonymity, but unless you're famous, then you have no anonymity. Quite interesting. And then oftentimes celebrities, they're shown to be happy at times, but you often hear sometimes they're not truly happy, especially in movies and such. Just quite interesting in human nature. How does that suggest? We desire to be known, but we also want anonymity at the same time. It's almost like when everyone knows everyone, you want anonymity, but when when nobody knows anybody, you kind of want to be known. And it's hard. I'm grasping at strings here. It's kind of hard, but this is, I think, more interesting. How would you compare anonymity and small town nature to our presence online? Now, besides, you have your tight knit communities online where pretty much you know people, you know everyone there, and but then you get the anonymity part, which is because the internet's so vast you can practically be anonymous at the same time, yet be fully known. Quite interesting, but in what ways are we both always known and always anonymous? I kind of meant that you'll be known in those tight knit communities, but to the internet as a whole, you're just, and to everyone else on the internet, you're practically anonymous. You can be anonymous online, yet fully unanonymous at the same time. It's hard to grasp, but that's what I think. And how does this affect we see ourselves, what we value? I do want to kind of mention that in my rhetoric class in high school, we actually read a book, Terms of Service. I think it was Terms of Service. We read Terms of Service. Yeah, that's the one. Where we talked a lot about privacy and anonymity online. That does kind of connect to this. There's a lot there. I do have some stuff talking about that on my other channel, but not too much. But it does affect what our online presence and anonymity does affect what we know and what we value. A tight-knit community will probably have more instinct values, but with the largeness online, there's so many values going on there. Who we associate does affect our values, and then and our online, those who maybe get a lot of online attention will see themselves made with in one way than a person who gets hardly any attention. And do you want that attention or not? Those who want that attention will see different than those who don't want attention, which could lead to something like depression potentially. You may have all those friends online, but do you really want those friends, or do you just want a few good friends? Kind of hard to grasp, to fully understand. There's all the strings pulling at, but there's kind of that. So let's move on to question 9. Miranda says it is sometimes necessary to break everything. Is it? What are the benefits of a post-flu world? Do we have to break things? How do we fit into the narrative of Station 11? Are we the people on the station, or are we people on the sea who spend all their time waiting for their lives to begin? So they're referring here mostly to the comic Station 11 in the book Station 11. But is it sometimes necessary to break everything? In a way, yes. Especially in times of great change, sometimes it's good to keep things the same, but at the same time it is good to break everything because it's like you have nothing to cling onto. It's kind of hard to, answer, but is it necessary? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. I would say generally no, because that piece of stability can be good in a great time of change. Something changes, well, you have that one thing you can hold on to and help keep you stable, keep you sane per se. In a way, that's what the Museum of Civilization did for Clark. It kept him sane, something he could hold on to as some form of stability in his life while moving forward in the new world. And also, what is the benefits of a post-flu world? And also, some of this does also refers to things in the book, but specifically the post-flu world is the novel itself. The benefits? Well, you got a lot of people to reevaluate things in a way, make things simpler to understand. It's kind of hard, I would say, but I think definitely one benefit is you got to live in communities where you generally knew the people you lived with. It's not like you live even in suburbs, in urban neighborhoods. You may you may know people, but it's not necessarily the people you live with. It's the people maybe you work with, people you went to school with, but you may not know your neighbor at all. You may not know everyone. You may live in a neighborhood where you know nobody yet, but you still have a social group somewhere else. It can happen, and I think that does occur a lot. So, do we have to break things? Not necessarily. How do we fit into the narrative of Station 11? Some of these questions are kind of hard, and some of these are actually quite easier to understand, I think, when you have other people to bounce thoughts off of. So I'm not sure how we, and I'm presuming we as an hour, will fit into the narrative of Station 11. I think the best thing is like, we're the before war. We're before the catastrophe that changed everything. And are we the people on the station or the people in the undersea? It's hard to say. Some people might be on the station, but some people might be. I think society as a whole is the undersea, waiting for their lives to begin. But there's so many people out there, there's going to be those handful of people who are not, the small communities. Let's go to 10 now. At the dinner party, so there's that awkward dinner party again. Elizabeth says she believes that all things happen for a reason. Now, it's just if everything happens for a reason, as personally, I believe that it does. When I hear a story of how two people came together, it's like a piece of plan is being revealed. Page 96. Considering that the readers know she's having an affair with Arthur at that moment, how do you interpret her understanding of fate? Is it a correct understanding? How does it compare to yours? Well, things do happen for a reason. We just don't necessarily understand the reason for sure. But her interpretation of fate is that everything happens for a reason. Everything that happens for a reason is good. I think is how. And it's not always going to be good. And is it a correct understanding? I don't know. We can't actually have any correct understanding of fate, of destiny. I think it's practically impossible. But her understanding of fate is like it's definitely like things happen for a reason, and it's always gonna be a good reason. which I think that harmonics to later with how she and her son became involved with that one group, that one religious cult, and then her son became the prophet that caused a lot of trouble later on in the timeline. It does kind of make sense of her, how in that her fate, like her and her son almost falling into that religious cult makes sense from this point. They were already in that mindset before they even joined, and you saw it going ahead. Um, and how does it compare to yours, as in my understanding? I know things do happen for a reason. I just don't know the reason. I think mine's a little more open, an open reasoning. I guess open thought. I never really given thought to this per se. Just kind of accepted that things happen because they happen. Events lead out a certain way, causing certain things to happen. One change here changes something, things like that, small things. But I honestly never given it that much thought. So, question 11. 11, station 11, question 11. Sorry. There are many instances in the novel in which the staging of or the art, when the staging or the artifice is considered more real, more attractive in reality. What would account for this disparity? How is this disparity related to Clark and Miranda's inability to know when author is performing or not, and how do we perform on a daily basis? So, with staging author is considered more real, I think in a way that's showing some escapism too from reality, but when so how would you account? Well, kind of escapism. You escape from reality. So what the staging, which is possibly more positive, more appealing, will look more attractive than actual reality. It's escapism. I think that's best. But the discrepancy relate to, but if you're aware that that's occurring, but you may not be able to tell that it's occurring at the same time. And I think that's kind of from when someone is good at acting, you may not always know when they're being well, not realistic, but when they're being real, or when they're just acting. And some of these are kind of harder to fully understand some things, but I'm going to focus more on the stats part. How do we perform on a daily basis? We this is very much based in social. This question could be very answered with lots of sociology. When you think about it, you have all this stuff you can talk about and with sociology and how we perform, but it's our roles. Me alone in my room, I'm quiet. I do more talking out loud than I do when I'm in public. That's me performing my role. In school, I'm slightly different than I am when I'm at my church. I act similarly but different. I interact with different people. But I'm going to focus. I'm going to use high school as a demonstration for this and talk about. So I'm going to focus on my senior year. So my first class of my day I had was French. So I acted differently in that class than I did my second class, calculus. I was one of two seniors in that class. It was mostly freshmen. I was an older kid. I set the example as I generally do, but I was the older kid in the class. But there was that. I acted one way. Besides, I acted my usual way in school, attentive and all that. But things that I would do in that class I wouldn't do like necessarily in calculus would be volunteer to run something for the teacher or to another teacher. Things like that, which I did a few times. And then of course in calculus we had a much smaller class too, mostly seniors, one junior. But we would I didn't volunteer to do as much running, so there was no need to do that as much. But I didn't think I talked as much in that class as I did in French. I think it was easier for me to talk in French, not just because it was in French, but because of the type of stuff more engaging. But different roles, different people, and then there's ROTC, which I took. JROTC, I should specify. I had after calculus. And then, so basically there, I was totally different. Like one thing is, I rarely stood, or not stood, I rarely sat, I should say. I, no, not rarely, but there were some days I would go a whole day without sitting. I was in a leadership role. I had to do leading, which often involved not sitting down except for during class. So, but I acted differently there. Maybe a little, I stood up straighter, I think, generally. Um, I think I projected a bit more. Maybe a bit sterner at times, per se. But that was the role I was playing. I was playing a leadership role. And we do perform on a daily basis. It's sociology, different groups. And I use my own life as an example, but we do perform on a daily basis based on who we are with. Many people, they act one way with their friends, but they act totally different with their parents. And then they act totally different in front of the teacher. Everyone has a different role. You know, let's just take drill instructors. Well, I don't know too much, mostly from movies and that, but they seem tough and that on the outside to the new recruits in the movies. And what I've been told, because I've talked to a few people, mostly what I've heard is from the ROTC instructors, but no, they're tough at you. You get, eventually they soften up, but that's because they soften up on everyone at a later stage. Their performance, their role is changing more from the guy who needs to whip you into shape to the guy who wants to make sure you do well. Does that make sense? But they still act differently than they would in front of their own family. Think about the president. How does any president, let's say any president in the entire history of the United States, he acts one way in front of the camera, but you know he acts differently in front of his family. You know he'll act independent. You know he'll act differently in the Oval Office than he would in the press room, if or any place else, because you know he'll act differently in front of the Secret Service agents than he would not. And like the Oval Office is one of the few places where he can get away from it, and so he'll act differently there than he might would in front of them, for example. And then you got you go to a whole list of things, how people act differently in front of different people. And that's our performance. We're performing a role at all times. It's sociology when you think about it, and that does kind of affect. And so, generally we're being sincere with our performance, but generally people may act, lie, deceive, that stuff that will occur. Con artists definitely perform a role that's, and you don't necessarily know that they're not being truthful in their role. But we do perform a role on a daily basis. We do perform. Maybe not to the extent that you don't know if somebody's sincere, but they're generally going to be sincere to you in the role, in the interaction between those two people. I could go on and on, but let's move on to question 12. And we're over halfway there. Regret and perfection seeking are central themes of this novel. For example, Miranda, for example, stands in front of the mirror saying she repents nothing and also repents almost everything. Kristen clearly used to work to perfection, quitting coloring when it wasn't just so, even when Miranda and Arthur tried to suggest otherwise. Where does the novel ultimately come out on the decision of regret? Do you agree with that position? What function does regret serve, if any? Well, regret, of course, is the feeling that you should have done something differently. In a way, the novel does kind of serve to show that regret does occur. You just have to deal with it and move on in a way. You can't focus on it because you have no chance at it. And if I'm grasping that correctly, that's why I feel like the function, but I'm just going yeah. So I think the novel does say regret is good to have, you just don't want to focus on it in a way. Like it could potentially hold you back from what you're good at. Just because something isn't quite right, don't regret, you keep on doing because you might regret not continuing through such. And what function does regret serve, if any? Well, I think rather than be in the novel in our own words. Unfortunately, my opinion, I regret those is that it shows you, I could have done this differently, and so in a similar situation, you might just do something differently. But let's move on to question 13. Kristen has a lot of problems with memory. In her later interview with Diallo, she says, "The more you remember, the more you lost." In fact, later in the novel, one of the town debates whether they should teach children about life before the collapse. Where do you stand on this? What is the importance of memory? How does it relate to Station 11 and the Undersea? So, the first part. So, where do I stand on this? Well, because I love history, I think you should teach those children in the novel about that pre-collapse world, because it's part of history. It helps them understand how their society got to where they are now. It might have been a step back, but it's some step forward, rebuilding society anew. But and also this way, per se, you teach about the collapse to the children, they teach their children, and so on. So that way, in the future, if something ever like this happens again, they might be able to repeat. They might, if something like the Georgia flu occurs again in the timeline in the book, they might be able to avoid it. Which, as I stated earlier in this video, those who don't know history are doomed repeating, and then adding on to that, those who do know history are doomed to watch you repeat it. And if people know history, they could prevent another pandemic when the world becomes a new society at the same level as before. If they know that this is what happened last time, they can prevent it again. In a way, because you saw how one simple disease just broke down society. And that could happen in our own world. Not a disease or something else could break down society. And we gotta look at how other societies collapse down, whether fictional or real. Probably the best real life example is the Bronze Age collapse, which was caused by so many factors that people don't know for sure what's actually happened there. But we don't know what fully caused the collapse. Maybe it's because they just didn't teach the people, and we do know what happened before and after, but we don't know what doing. And it's almost like, so we didn't know, it's almost like this is like that debate that could have happened during that collapse is happening during the collapse in the book. Do we teach what happened? And it seems like in Station 11, the answer seems to be leaning toward we should. Well, it seems like in the Bronze Age collapse, in reality, the answer was not really, because we don't know what happened in the Bronze Age collapse. I know this is kind of interesting, but they do relate these collapse, and for my approach of history, does make some sense. Like, well, if we don't know what caused this collapse in reality, so if there's another collapse, we should definitely teach about that collapse to the survivors and their children, so that way when society recovers and rebuilds itself anew, we can avoid such a collapse again, hopefully, because we'll know history won't be doomed to repeat it. Okay, that's my thoughts on teaching collapse and of the importance of memory. How does it relate to Station 11 and the Undersea? So it's referring to the comic book, I believe, here. So it seems like the people in Station 11 have full memory of what occurred in that, but the people in the Undersea don't. That's, I think, where it goes. But the importance of memory. Memory is important. Helps you remember what has happened and maybe how to avoid similar events in the future. So I'll just say, relate, I can't touch on that already. So let's move on to question 14 now. On pages 114 and 115, Raymond and Diallo get in a discussion about history. Diallo says, the more we know about the fallen world, the better we'll understand what happened when it fell. Raymond replies that they do know what happened, but everybody knows what happened. The new strain of swine flu, and then the flights out to Moscow, those driving at. Nevertheless, I believe in understanding history. What exactly is the difference between knowing what happened and understanding history? Is the correctly suggests that you can know what happened in the past and still not understand it. What exactly does what exactly does one do when they understand rather than just know history? What kinds of things have you known but not understand? So there's a lot there to unpack, but I've touched on some of them before, so I'll try to kind of summarize my things. When you know history, think of that more like elementary school history. You learn the date. You learn that on July 4th, 1776 is when the Declaration of Independence was signed. Then you learn that then you might learn the no, you learn when the dates, when things happen. You learn the timelines. You don't learn how they're connected and how they work, how that kind of stuff. No, you learn that when Germany invaded Poland in World War II. You learn when the atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. You learn when King John signed the Magna Carta. You learned when this happened. That's like elementary school history. You learn when things happen. You learn when wars are fought from when. You learn when the Great Depression occurred. You learn when something was invented. You learn when someone was born. That's, I think, the knowing history. You know what happened and when it happened, but you don't understand. Understanding is broader. It's closer to what you get in, not so much in middle school that you're approaching there, but in high school and I think college definitely. You get to understand what happened. You learn more about the cause and the effect. How did this impact this? You understand the connections better. You learn more than just a simple timeline. You learn how things are interconnected. Learn how a decision in 1918 affected affected what happened in the 1930s and 40s. While knowing it, you know it happened. You know the Treaty of Versailles was signed in 1918, and you know World War II started in 1939, but you don't know how they're really connected. You don't know the impact the treaty had on the German people. You don't know how it laid the groundwork for what occurred in Germany during that time. So yeah, and when you understand rather than know history, well, you understand history when you understand the connections. There's a branch of history and fiction, or there's always historical fiction, of course, which does help understand, but there's something called alternate history, which in a way does kind of rely with a theory of parallel universes in there, which is mentioned in the novel, how something just so tiny could change. Like in this book, you could write a version where one character survived, and that would be considered an alternate history because somebody survived that didn't. But in the book, they actually mentioned there could be a parallel universe where the flu made you sick, you could still survive from it. Just a small genetic mutation caused a survivability from that virus. But that does show that alternate history does, I think, help in some understanding. You know what happened, in that you look at, well, and if you don't, and I think to know alternate history, you need to understand history. Sure, it's kind of hard, but if you know that this caused this and how these are connected, you know what would happen if you took one of those things out and how history would change. I think that's definitely knowing history. You need to know alternate history to understand history. At the same time, you need to understand history to know alternate history. And getting the grasp of, okay, we changed something minute, and then we got to work out how the world changed as a result of that one tiny change. It's speculative fiction when you look at it, but it does help get you an understanding and appreciation of what did happen. You learn how that a small change, could be something as simple as one soldier fell asleep on guard duty during a war, or was awake when he actually fell asleep. Something like that, you understand how minute details can actually affect the greater impact of history. What kind of things have you known and not understood? There's probably a lot you could mention that you know but not understood. Like, you can say you know how processed food is made, but you don't understand it. But I'm not sure if that will qualify. I think a lot of people know religion but don't understand religion. I think a lot of people know government and politics but don't understand it. I think that's a key one. I definitely used to just know government and then politics. I know the parties. I know who the stuff are, but I'm in the point where I'm starting to understand how they're related and such. And it's quite confusing and complicated. I think that's one thing I'm almost changing on what I've known but now understand. So 15. After meeting the prophet, Kristen says to August, if you are the light, if your enemies are darkness, then there's nothing you cannot justify. There's nothing you cannot survive because there's nothing that you will not do. How does the prophet way think compared to our modern world? Well, think of any religious extremist, which the prophet and his followers are essentially part of. They're religious extremists. They have an extreme philosophy where they won't accept any other view, which the other religious people, they will listen to you. They may reject it, but not will listen. But like the religious extremists, they don't even want to hear it. Think the Christian Crusades in the 1300s. That's a good Christian example. Or think the Ku Klux Klan nowadays would be a better example of die-hard Christian extremists who are interesting though. Like I won't get into them, but they could be an example of that, where they interpret it in such a way that they're the only ones that actually matter. Then you get over in the Middle East, you have the jihadists, the Islamic jihadists, and they're fighting essentially basically a Muslim version of the Christian Crusades. They view themselves as right. There's no way nobody else can be right, and they're in the right, and everyone else is in the wrong, and that gives them the power to do as they want. But those are just more bigger things. Those smaller things. If you have I think you get this some with the millennials and some with the Generation Z's, where they're told they are the best. They're one in a million, which that's a bad saying because that means there's 300 people just like you in the United States. And that's why I think some people say 1 in a billion, but that means there's like 6 people like you in China and India. There's there's 6 other people like you in the world. 1 person just like you in India, like 1 in China, but that's beyond the point. The saying like you're 1 in a billion, 1 in a million, well, gives the child a certain sense of entitlement. And even if it's not true, which those statements do reflect based off the numbers, but they feel like they're so special in that, especially when they get spoiled, which is occurring more and more, unfortunately. They always get what they want, so the parents always say they're always right with everything they do. Then they get thrown in public schools and they can't accept the fact that they may answer a question wrong because they were always treated that everything they said was right by the parents. That's a smaller scale that is not, unfortunately, not so small. I can talk about yeah. And his thinking does compare to our modern world in a sense when you just look at politics. The divide between Democrats and Republicans, between liberals and conservatives, between the left and the right, is becoming sharp. Well, the people if you're a liberal, you're a Democrat, you're on the left. The people on the right, Republicans and conservatives, are always wrong. Whatever they say is wrong, and vice versa, causing political stalemate, which is so frustrating. But stalemate in a sense, and that is almost how our government was designed. But beyond that, in a way, that's another way to look at it. When you think your political ideology is the only political ideology that's correct and matters, there's no way you'll be ever able to compromise with the other side of the political spectrum. There's no way. And I think that's probably the biggest thing in the world of the United States today. Now, the whole world itself, there's so many examples, and there's smaller examples, town examples, but I think those are some of the big examples of how the prophet's way think compared to our modern world. How when you think you're in the right and you're opposites on the wrong, you can never compromise, you can never come to understand one another. 16. The novel explores quite deeply the idea of fame and its role in our world. Kristen, for example, seems to really hang on to the idea of also as a fall. Why is that? Why would she take of all the books dear V? What kind of person was V? What and why did the book get published? Frank, meanwhile, goes by for a philanthropist who makes the case that celebrities do charity work to be seen and remembered. Interesting, Zivan takes this aspect with him. How? Why do these images of celebrity compare to Elizabeth in the airport using the currency of celebrity to convince people to keep the runway clear? Of what importance is celebrity and fame to you? Why are the ideas of celebrity and fame, not to mention the people themselves, points of discussion and interest in so much pop culture? So there's a lot to break down there. So let's begin with hang on to the idea. Kristen hangs on to the idea of also at the fall. Well, also that act is like all she really remembers of the pre-fall, the pre-collapse world. That's like the biggest thing. And she barely remembers her parents and all that, but she remembers also one of the last things she saw before the collapse was his death. So he's something that connects. He's like the connection for her to the old world, and that's probably why she's fascinated with him. And she takes the book Dear V, I think simply because it's about him, trying to give a better look at himself, more into his life. And what kind of person was V? Obviously an opportunistic friend of also. That's what I'm going on based off what I read. And maybe not the best well off until the book was published. They didn't have much after the book, of course, because of the collapse, but I think definitely there's been opportunistic. And why does the book get published? Probably for the money. That's a character speculate, and I kind of agree. And then Frank, which is Jivan's brother, goes by for Flamsis. Makes case that 70s you charity work to be seen and remembered. In a way, I do think that is true with a lot, not all celebrities, but some. Some definitely do that. Like, cause then there's some things that just prove that, but you get some like, the phony foundations sometimes that occur, not all the time, but sometimes they do occur. But you get the legitimate ones too, which obviously they're doing good, but how much of it are they really doing for the attention of donating, which makes them more popular, which could help the cause, but at the same time, it's like, there is something to be said that they probably are just acting in the wrong run, for say to make themselves, but not all. There's bound to be a few. Perhaps the ones who keep their philanthropy more secret. Or then you get in the case of like comics, where you get the philanthropists who only do that to disguise from the fact they're fighting crime, but that's in the comic book world and not the real world. But definitely used for attention getting in our case. So, Jivan takes this aspect with him. Why? I don't remember that part, but it does kind of make some sense. I'm not so sure because I don't remember that part of the book super well. And how do the images of subject compare to Elizabeth's airport using currency? I kind of alluded to this earlier in this question, but she clears the runway, so everyone like, she's a celebrity, she's doing it, so we're doing it too. You get celebrity who says, I'm donating $1,000 to X charity. Then you get a bunch of people, not 1,000, probably like $10,000, $1 million, something, to X charity. A bunch of people are like, we should donate to that charity too. Kind of bandwagon effect. You get a celebrity supporting a politician. That helps that politician a lot. The bandwagon effect. And celebrities are good at leading those. Okay, of what importance is celebrity and fame to you? Not too much. I don't pay attention to that stuff, so. And I really don't want super fame. I want to be known, but not super fame. Not famous. Known among people I want to know me. Does that make sense? I guess. Why are the ideas of celebrity and fame, not to mention the people themselves, points of discussion interest? And again, kind of, I think that the reason why we talk about celebrities in our world in pop culture is, well, it gives us something to talk about, sure, but also the escapism from our reality, which is weird but does make sense. Like, you read about the people who live these rich and luxurious lifestyles while you're sitting home in a either you're in a city in a two-bedroom apartment if you're lucky. I don't know if you're lucky. I don't know anything about living in the city, but you live in a small apartment in Chicago or New York, or you're in the suburbs of those cities in a smaller house. So you get farther out to the periphery of the suburbs, and you get larger houses with bigger yards, and then you get a rural. But it's all the time, like, no matter where you are, you generally will have people still talking about celebrities and what they're doing, fascinated with their lives they themselves, the people who are talking about the celebrities, cannot live. Escapism, I'm thinking? Question 11. Station 11 really underlines the importance of humans in their function in the world as we enjoy it today. There had always been a massive, delicate infrastructure of people, all of them working unnoticed around us. And when people stop going to work, the entire operation grinds to a halt. Page 178. Why do we not understand the infrastructure? What is that makes us blind to it? After all, we see people doing these things. We see people deliver gas. We see people go to factories. We see people stock grocery shelves. We see farmers working fields. Why don't we know? Is this related in some way to Jeevan's reaction to his surgeries later? It meant a great deal to him to be able to help, but physical pain in the post-anesthesia era often left him shaken. Page 270. So, that is true. We don't really see. We don't pay attention. We don't know them. As long as our lives are in order, we often don't care about all the other people. We'll care when somebody doesn't deliver the gas. We'll care when our Amazon packages don't get delivered. But as long as they're getting delivered, we don't think about the people involved in making the process. And especially in a world of increasing automation, sometimes we assume some stuff is going to be fully automated. And someday it might be. But yeah, why do we not understand infrastructure? Well, we don't understand because we don't pay attention to it. And we only pay attention to it when there's a problem with it that affects us. Think about when, like, I think 70s was when there was the gasoline shortages because of conflict in the Middle East. Before, and well, then how, gas rationing, we think of that stuff, but like only when it matters. Like World War II was, I think, the last time people really thought of rationing food. Nowadays, we don't give a think to that kind of stuff. And rationing does need stuff, but does that relate? Maybe, because that's part of the infrastructure. But as long as we're getting what we need, we don't think about what allows it to get there. Is this related to Jivin's reaction to surgeries later? I'm not sure. I really am not sure. Maybe. Because, it's like, again, you don't think about something? I'm not sure. Hard to answer. Let's go to 18. Right before Frank commits suicide, he brings up the idea of civilization and what it meant to him. After I was shot, when they told me I wouldn't walk again and I was lying in the hospital, I spent a lot of time thinking about civilization. What it means and what I value in it. I remember thinking that I never wanted to see a war zone again as long as I live. I still don't. Unquote, page 183. Later, after Elizabeth bemoans the end of civilization, Clark quips, quote, "It was always a little fragile when you say," unquote. What is civilization to Frank, to Clark, to Elizabeth? What is it to the rest of the characters? Do we regularly think about what civilization is? Or do we only think about it when it is threatened? Do we only care about something when we might lose it? Why? That last point, do we only care when we might lose it? I mentioned that, I think, in the last question. And in a way, yeah. When something's missing, we'll care about it. But as long as we have it, we don't care. But I think to Frank, but let's talk about the first part they had though. So civilization to Frank, I think, was I think for Frank was no lack no not a war zone was kind of broad for him, but basically stability, peace, that kind of stuff, where he could live without seeing where he could live without a war zone. I think for him that's what the most say based off of what I remember. For Clark, I think civilization was a lot different for him. For him, I think it was more about maybe a little more about the stuff. But I think maybe, especially later on, to him, civilization was about what the stuff represented about civilization more than it represented civilization. Because he started that, because that's almost how he is. Like, almost a collection of things is almost how I think Clark would. And to Elizabeth, I think civilization was just a reason for her was just a mechanism in the process of fate and that based off of her character. Probably had the most interesting view of civilization based off the characters. Other characters, different characters of course will have different. For also Lindo, I think for him I'm not so sure not enough, but for Jeevan, I think for him, for him civilization was more of was about finding meaning in your life. Almost, I think is almost how he saw civilization. And when you find meaning, you found your place in civilization per se. Tyler Lindo, for him it was, well, people were doing what he wanted as part of his religious cult, I would say. But Kristen Kristen, so her, I think for her, civilization would be the most difficult because she's the one who probably least remembers the old civilization. So for her, I think civilization for her was more pretty much the symphony. For her, that was what civilization was to her, what she knew. It's hard to explain. Civilization can be hard to grasp, but do we really think about civilization? I think the only people in society who think about civilization are sociologists. Normal, everyday. I know I don't think about civilization often, and I think most people just don't. And what we think, yeah, we hear that North Korea creates a new undergoing these kind of events. North Korea is testing a ballistic missile. Are we gonna be alright in America? Are we gonna be alright? People start thinking. Then we forget about it when North Korea settles down. Or we get other things. Let's look in the Cold War. I think then people were thinking more about civilization, especially like during the Cuban Missile Crisis. People trying to preserve themselves in in certain elements of civilization. I think that's more. We do think. I think when threatened, think about it when things threaten it. Okay, August is so question 19. August is a bit of a wonder. It's not really clear how much he's able to pick up all things he has, especially about the series of multiple universes, without much or perhaps any form of schooling before the class. August seems to be finds it maddening. How little others knew given how much time these people spent looking up things on the internet before the end of the war. Page 220. Not 200 I meant. What do you know and look up? How could you contribute? Okay, so what do you know and look up? Well, what I know is a lot of stuff. If I list everything I know, that would take a lot. But I know a lot of history and some science too, like these real books. Oftentimes my scientific knowledge is mostly limited to the stuff that I looked up in relation to like what was shown in Star Trek. That's how okay, I'm interested about that one thing they mentioned in Star Trek episodes. So I went to look it up. Then I know it. So I pretty much look up things I'm interested in. I look up when I need to research something for a YouTube video or a school project. That's the things I look up when I don't know. Or I look it up anyhow just to make sure I'm accurate. How could you contribute what? I'm not sure. But like a lot of things, so I'm not sure about that second part of that question, but I just want to talk about that Marvel Universes thing, which I mentioned earlier. Most of the stuff I know about that, I got from watching Star Trek and then looking it up on my own. So people did know, probably the people who did know died. But let's move on to question 20. We're getting close to the end here. The Museum of Civilization is quite an interesting place. Why was it started? What kinds of things are there? What do the objects they keep suggest about people in their own narrative? The stories they like to tell? What things are there and what is missing? So, so, so why was it started? No, Clark just started it because he did. He had one one credit card, one driver's license, and his phone. I think it was an iPhone. I'm not sure, but that's what, or an iPad. That's what started it, and soon it just started coming out. Other people added stuff. Engine engines that car engines showed up eventually. A motorcycle showed up. You had newspapers. You and newspapers also from the current world as a book showed up eventually too, which is quite interesting. And a bunch of other small stuff too, things like that. But so yeah, things there, things that people can carry mostly. The motorcycle and the engines are probably the only things that people couldn't carry. Probably the only reason the engines there. The three car engines were probably because they were nearby the airport, and the motorcycle because the guy who gave it was riding it for a while till he ran out of gas, and he just, when he arrived at that airport in the Museum of Civilization, he just left it there because he had no more use for it. But it does give a show, but show a lot things there, and the objects they keep suggest about people's own narrative. I think that things there that things that people miss. They miss newspapers, which is, and I think part of things they things like books, technology. I think is a big thing that people miss, and a bunch of other small stuff is what people miss. The small stuff that the modern conveniences, but the big things I would say are generally missing. Like I don't know. I think hard to say what all is missing from it, but the what things are there and what missing. Kind of mentioned there, but missing. So like I think I'm not sure what is missing because I'm sure there's a lot of things. Maybe it's books. I know there's some books, but maybe toys. Who knows? I honestly don't know what is missing. Probably the important stuff. Like I think there's a lot of more trinket-like stuff, not so much many documents. And I think that's what is missing. The documents that encapsulate civilization at the time. It's the reason why they're missing probably is because they were on the internet. And then of course the narrative. They do tell a narrative. This is what those people miss about the old world. And they were putting it here so they can reminisce without distracting them from their new lives per se. It's hard to say. But 21. Question 21. Elizabeth leaves the airport to live a more spiritual life. Are their lives not spiritual? What makes life spiritual? This is a very maybe theological philosopher, bit philosophy, that kind of stuff. What does make life spiritual? Hard to say. And spiritual for one person may not be spiritual for another person. For some people, just going to church every Sunday, that's spiritual. But for some people, that's not spiritual enough. For them, they add in daily devotions, or they go to, or things like that. Which can be important to do. It's hard to say what is spiritual, because anything can essentially become spiritual if somebody puts a religious connotation behind it. Quite hard to grasp what is spiritual. And as for Elizabeth to live a more spiritual life, well, Elizabeth and her son were living a pretty spiritual life. Probably pretty spiritual by the standards that most people would say as normal spiritual. And that's you do weekly church. For normal spiritual, weekly church, you say a prayer at your meals and before you go to bed, and maybe when you wake up. That's like a normal spiritual, I think, in our world. I think, hard to say. And then, but here they were living a more spiritual life by a normal standard. if you take it as an average, which is hard to do. I mean, a spiritual life can be quite anything. It's hard to answer, and I did the best I can based off of this. So, okay. So 22. It says, read the ending of the novel closely and pay attention to juxtaposition. The placement of ideas next to one another, thereby linking them in meaningful ways. In very short, we hear Tyler say that Dr. Eleven's enemies are not bad, they just won't go home. And we know that Tyler elevated Tyler elevated the comic to the status as a prophecy. Then also goes on stage and pushes all his regrets and thinks of all that was good. We get a show glimpse of Station 11 explaining the death as a waking up from a dream. Page 130. Clark takes Christian up to see the glow of lights in the distance, and she leaves with the symphony to go outside the usual territory towards the lights. As he thinks of all he's seen, Clark thinks of Miranda, who we know watched the ships out at sea and thought of Station 11 as she died, and thinks of all the possibility. Considering what we know about Station 11, King Lear, and the war of the novel, is the ending as optimistic as Clark appears? Defend your claim. So this is definitely a harder one to answer, but first of all, I don't have a good basis of King Lear for at all. If I did, it would be much easier to answer this question. So, yeah, so how would I answer it? Is it as optimistic? In a way, it is, but it isn't. Optimistic as the fact that society is rebuilding itself, but that's maybe about it as optimism, because you still have all the other people. People you need to convince, people who are paranoid for another collapse that happened. So it's optimistic since society is beginning to rebuild, but that's the end of maybe the good. It's so hard to say. It really is hard to say. It can be as optimistic as it appears, because just think about it. Let's just take an actual historical example to help wrap this around. The Bronze Age collapse. I would say to those who survived, it was not that optimistic for them that society will rebuild itself, and some thought, yeah, society will rebuild itself in that. And society has. To the same interconnectedness, and more so than the Bronze Age society. But there's that there. So yeah, it wasn't optimistic for round, but optimism is always good in a way. Be optimistic but realistic. It's hard to say. I would say it is decently optimistic. I'm just double checking the race here. Maybe not as optimistic as he is thinking, but is optimistic to a degree. It's like things. Oh, after the events with the prophet, things are now returning to normal, to more normalcy. But things have not reached yet. It's hard to say. It's so hard to answer this question and also defend it. But yeah. But to say that it is optimistic, I think yes, because people seem to be beginning to rebuild. They'll rebuild society. They got towns. And that's always a good thing for society, for a big larger civilization. Electricity seems to be popping up again. That eventually means that eventually there will be new things coming around too. Internet will maybe come back up. Now, granted, that who knows? It may not, because internet is interesting. You need a network of computers to connect the internet. It's hard to understand, it's complicated on trying to understand the internet. But as long as you can give power to enough computers operate, doing the stuff, as long as the internet servers are operating, you will have internet. And so, when they rediscover the internet, because they know it existed, so that could be on the top of their list. It's when and if they rediscover the internet, they'll learn a lot about the world that was. Because if the information survived. Because things do survive on the web. But will they all survive? It's hard to say. But it's hard to answer some of these questions in that. No. Yeah. Okay, so I think that's actually it. I'm done talking about these questions here. So I'm nearly 2 hours, which is a long video. So, but I think I'm just upload it in bulk, and then and then divide it into a couple small pieces or whatnot, and I'll just upload it in bulk. Actually, yeah. So yeah, so you're seeing this all as one big gigantic video. But don't worry, I will later on today have a shorter video where I do some more not so broad stuff, not answering all these specific questions. But the few things I do kind of want to mention, I mentioned that I kind of thought of earlier, like things I mentioned how I think someone should have been doing steam travel, and I think because there's this place where electricity seems to be popping up, steam travel could be popping up again. It would be so beneficial to this world, in my opinion. And then, of course, you got now electricity, so potential internet, and of course, I do wonder, did any countries survive? Did any elements of governments survive? There's a few countries that, North Korea is like the only country that had best chance of surviving due to the isolated nature. Some Pacific Island nations too. But like, did elements of government survive? I'm so fascinated by that happening. But that concludes my video, cause I have stated enough, and I've been at this for over an hour and 40 minutes, and I think it deserves a respite. Thank you for joining me today.